Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's webinar, jointly hosted by IHRP and MaivenPoint. Today we'll be talking about learning with an impact in our hybrid workforce. In this session, we'll be exploring some of the topics on how to weave learning and development intuitively into employees' flow of work through MS Teams, and then how to systematically scale hybrid training programs that are global, consistent while staying locally relevant, how you can bring subject matter experts together as a community of professionals to discuss topics of interest and engage in peer learning within an organization. Afterwards, there will be a short demonstration of MaivenPoint's platform. And last but not least, we'll answer your burning questions in the Q&A section. So don't forget to drop any of your questions in the Q&A function, which we'll be answering during the Q&A session later. So without further ado, let me now introduce the speakers for this webinar. First of all, we have Timothy Boettcher, Head of MaivenPoint North America, and Viktor Lindblom, Senior Director, Learning and Development of AvePoint.
Hi everyone, thank you for that introduction and thank you to everybody for the opportunity to speak today. As mentioned, my name is Timothy Boettcher, Head of MaivenPoint for North America, which is the e-learning solution platform from AvePoint Inc. And joining me today from AvePoint is Viktor Lindblom, who is the Global L&D Senior Director of AvePoint's L&D operations. So today we're going to be discussing the changing landscape of hybrid learning in the context of a real-world example of the challenges that we faced in AvePoint and how we rolled out global training across all of our different offices by showing you a demo of how we're using the hybrid technology and automation to streamline and ensure that we're getting effective training globally. But to set the scene on what that looks like, giving background on today's challenges and what the goal of what we're trying to achieve and how we're addressing them, I'd like to introduce Viktor to talk a little bit more about the background.
Thanks for that introduction, Tim, and great to be with you all here today. To set the scene a little bit and kind of talk about the context before we get into the demo itself, one of the things in the industry and in the L&D space generally that we sometimes battle with a little bit is that L&D and training is sometimes seen as kind of a remedial action or a little bit of a necessary evil, maybe a compliance-based tick box that we need our audiences to tick. And we feel like some of the reasoning behind that perception is that actually the business goal and the specific ROI that we are looking to address and generate with the learning solution isn't necessarily planned into the learning initiative from the start. So where we've seen really great success actually as an organization is in going back to what we're trying to address as an organization from an outcome perspective, and then really developing our learning solutions with a very practical learning model around, again, what we're trying to do from a business perspective. This might sound really simple and really straightforward, but what that does do is it requires you to think about your learning solution a little bit differently, which we'll get into on the next slide. What we're really saying though here is that instead of sort of knowledge retention, we're actually much more interested in skill development and in applying the skills that have been acquired throughout the learning process. So our model here at AvePoint is highly outcome-based with validation and alignment sort of from a business perspective built into the learning content itself. One of the other challenges, though, that I'm sure will resonate with many people here on the call today is that as a global organization, we have global training requirements that we do need to meet as an organization. But at the same time, many of our local offices have regional programming requirements, maybe compliance requirements, paperwork requirements, and so on, where, yes, we do need to kind of provide programming and messaging from a training perspective that's globally consistent, but making it globally consistent to maximize reach also actually means we need to still retain the kind of locally relevant training materials and provide a user experience and learning experience that's really relevant for each region wherever they are. And so some of the things that Tim will be talking about later on today, I think address that very nicely. We feel like we've been able to identify a model and really hone in on a learning model and a way of hosting and deploying learning in a global organization where, again, from a global messaging standpoint, training completion standpoint, we can protect the global consistency, but still actually provide a framework that accounts for the local requirements within all of our markets. Unless you have anything else to add, Tim?
Yeah, so that's definitely one of the challenges we see with our customers as well, Viktor. You hit the nail on the head there, where you want to provide that balance about, giving local teams and the local audiences the autonomy to be able to deliver a training in a way that's going to be relevant and hit the mark for them, but also having that global consistency as well. So I think that's very important. And you mentioned as well about the skills, moving from just a knowledge goal to a skills goal, which we'll get more into on the same slide. But as mentioned there, there was a LinkedIn Learning report that came out this year that talked about how the skill sets for jobs have been changing. And particularly, we look at things like ChatGPT and other kinds of disruptive technologies coming into the workforce. The workers of today and employees of today need to be armed with the relevant skills they need to stay effective. And this is constantly changing. So that's part of the reason why I think this is critical.
Yeah, for sure. So on that note then, let's kind of take a little bit of a step back and look at the model itself and how we've kind of applied this learning model here at AvePoint before we get into the demo itself. On this slide, what we're really talking about is kind of from a content and a programming perspective, how are we approaching the sort of authoring and deployment work here at AvePoint. There's some fairly common misconceptions, I think, in the field generally. For instance, many organizations tend to think narrowly about training and L&D as sort of a knowledge increase tool, if you will, where, for instance, if you're a very sales-driven organization, you might have this misperception in your organization that actually our people need to know all the things about all the solutions in order to sell them. And what we're sort of saying from an AvePoint perspective is that it is probably true that they need to know some things about your solutions. They need to know the right things, obviously, but you can take that a little bit further, actually, and hone in on developing the right skills that they need to apply what they've learned in a very practical way so that they can position the solution properly and then sell it. So we're kind of taking it a little bit further by actually going beyond just knowledge retention and figuring out what the skill gaps and the skills are that we need to develop in order to meet a business metric.
That old
organization.
It's that old joke in training, right? About you never get a subject matter expert to teach a course because you only want to teach what's important and what's applicable. But to a subject matter expert, everything's important, everything's applicable, right?
I think you could say the same thing about product people sometimes too, right? But we've probably all been there in some context. I think the other kind of important thing to maybe debunk here at the start is that sometimes organizations tend to think, well, information leads to application. So all I really need to do is I need to give these people all of the information and then they're going to go and apply it, right? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. We feel like it's actually really important to, first of all, figure out again what the skills are, the skill gaps are that we're looking to address from a training perspective, and then address those, but actually be really specific about what the application is that you are asking people to work towards following your training engagement. So the training really should be much more targeted from an enablement perspective, focusing on a predetermined call to action, which will help us get traction with alignment again on the business metric. I kind of said this before, but knowledge retention equals success. I think a lot of companies and kind of people who are sort of a bit more legacy minded still think like that. We'll put this training engagement together, then we'll measure success by attaching a quiz or an assessment. And if Tim on our call today can pass the quiz or assessment with an 80% score, then he's good and he can now go do what he needs to do. Again, that could be the case, but I feel like that's a somewhat dangerous assumption to make. What we're saying here is that actually maybe the business result should be the success metric that we are working towards. In other words, success based on the impact on the business metric, which we've hopefully calculated and worked towards at the start of this engagement. That's really how we should be measuring our success. So ultimately, success comes out of moving the business needle in the direction it needs to go in. For all of that to happen, and this is sort of the grand narrative and conclusion on the slide, if you will, what we're really talking about is, effective learning initiatives should be clearly measurable. They should have a clear business, again, metric that we're working towards. They should be outcome based so that people can go do something after, learning about something. They should be able to apply what they've learned immediately, and we should be much more targeted and intentional in the call to action we are driving people towards. If we can measure the result before our learning engagement, do the learning engagement, deploy the learning engagement, support the learning engagement, let it run for a little while with some coaching and support behind the scenes, and then again, do a kind of another data cut after deploying the learning engagement. You should have a really good program and a good approach to, again, validate your success based on a business metric rather than just knowledge retention. On that, I've said a lot there. Tim, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to the mix here.
No, I think that's super insightful, and it's helpful to focus that. So, in terms of designing that learning program, designing it towards the outcome is critical, and that's something we'll be able to show in our demo a little bit later. So thank you. Equally important as that, of course, is the actual learning experience itself as well. When you think about the different constraints of deploying a learning program, like how much time is at your disposal to achieve your goals, and who's available, and not to mention that a lot of studies show that collaborative learning from your peers, interacting with your peers, and having a collaborative learning experience actually leads to stickier outcomes and better results, right? So when time is at a premium, when you want to reduce as many blockers and as many barriers and friction as possible, the ultimate kind of learning experience is one that's seamlessly blended into your work environment, right? I think learning the flow of work is kind of a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but most people are working in collaborative tools like Microsoft Teams and working with their colleagues in other sorts of chats and collaborative programs. Having to stop that and go to another system and log in and try and ask people to go and access this content becomes very difficult. So, our vision at MaivenPoint of a sort of a utopia learning environment is one where the learning is brought to the learners, and it's done in a way that's collaboratively, that enables real-time chats and seamlessly blends both on-demand and structured and results-driven content, along with the interactive and the live presentations and training too. And by putting it in a collaborative space actually allows you to uncover from your peers, from your colleagues, uncover SMEs in the organization and other people who can help contribute and share and learn together collaboratively, which is, again, putting it into action, like you were saying. It's not just sitting in a classroom listening to a lecture or just clicking through online on a course. It is the interactive discussions, it is the on-demand content with the chats, and it is learning together with your peers. So this is what we see as a really good hybridized employee learning experience. And so cutting down on operational efficiencies, having repeatable content, having blended learning paths, and getting really the best of both worlds. So to that effect, this is what we're doing for our demo. So the goal is, of course, being able to deliver blended global manager training. So Victor, did you want to tell us a little bit more about what the initiative was for the manager training at AvePoint?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been working on recently here at AvePoint is this blended manager and leadership training program that Tim was talking about there. One of our challenges, frankly, was that we didn't really have a good mechanic and methodology for having this kind of always on type of learning at our disposal that had this kind of practical outcome-based model that we were talking about before. And we didn't really have a good way of scaling that out to all of our regions. So while there was lots of ad hoc support and local sessions happening and so on within each of our regions, we didn't kind of have a unified umbrella for leadership development here at AvePoint. And so one of the things that we've done, actually leveraging MaivenPoint, is we've created now this program to upskill all of our managers globally, leveraging not just the unified approach and the sort of outcome-based model that Tim was talking about there before, but actually we're leveraging MaivenPoint to kind of stitch together an experience from multiple different elements, including the ILT sessions, a playbook that we've built, there's LinkedIn Learning integration, and many other elements in addition to this social element that Tim was talking about there, to provide kind of a seamless, always-on learning experience to support a management code that we've launched internally here at AvePoint in the last 6 months or so. And I think one of the really interesting things about this experience is that, again, we're leveraging MaivenPoint to, again, host a unified experience that's actually blending elements from many different components all together in one unified and seamless learning shell, if you will. So that's worked really, really well for us. Maybe, Tim, you want to say a few words about that before we get into the demo itself?
Yeah. So talking of what went well, as you'll see in the next slides in the demo, I think you'll really see how effective it was to have that blended mix, just like you were saying, of both the on-demand structured content that's leading to a results-based outcome and is trackable and is measurable, but how that's blended together in the same spot, in the same way, along with the live instructor-led training where we had guest speakers on different topics. So enough talking, let's launch straight into it. So first of all, I just want to give you an overview of what the course looks like in Curricula. So Curricula is obviously our product that we use for delivering and leading these training sessions. It's essentially our learning management system, but it's a lot more than your classic LMS where it's a separate browser-based system. This is tightly integrated into Microsoft Teams, as we'll show you in a second. But what I want to show you first is the TakePoint Manager training, TakePoint being the name of our leadership training here in AvePoint. What you'll notice is we have a course manager, we have a course duration, and we've got a number of different classes. So in our tool, creating a course defines your lesson plan. So this is where you will outline all the different lessons, whether there's a meeting invitation attached in Teams, and what all the different ad hoc activities are that are stored in the lesson plan. Each one of these class of learners will become its own dedicated team automatically in Microsoft Teams. So one of the great features is you don't have to be a Microsoft Teams expert. You don't even have to be a technology expert. The tool is built for instructors, for L&D educators to be able to create their lesson plans and learning parts. And when they publish them, it automatically creates different teams for different regions. And this gives you the opportunity to have different audiences, right? So your different classes of managers and people that you want to address. And like we mentioned, so each you have the opportunity, you could have just one class if you wished, or you could have multiple classes. But in our case, we really wanted that globally consistent but locally relevant. And by making it locally relevant, we wanted to have local owners, local language, and local delivery while keeping with the overall consistent global structure. Okay, so let me show you what that looked like in Curricula. So from Curricula, what we're able to do, this is the interface here that an administrator will see. So we can see the different ongoing courses. We can click on course to go into our specific courses, look for our TakePoint course, and you can organize this using different programs and permissions, and you can have different permission levels as well so that different members in your team have different level of access depending on their role and what they're doing in the training. And then you can click on configure. Okay. Now, this is where you can see things like we've got our different classes set up. Obviously, this is the demo environment. We couldn't show the real, the number of AvePoint managers and the kinds of things going on there. So, what we're showing here is that we've set up our different classes with our different audiences, and then we're setting up our lesson plan. And the way that this worked is with the TakePoint program, we were releasing one lesson every month over a 6-month period. So you can see here we're up to lesson 3, from setting expectations to coaching to performance management. And what we were able to do is for each one of these lessons, we would have a different speaker from the AvePoint executive team come in and share their experiences and lead the session and facilitate those live discussions. And with this lesson planning tool, what you're able to do is assign different timing and different speakers and trainers to the different local classes. So this is a really easy way that you, as an instructor, as an L&D professional, is able to create large training programs and be able to scale them across different trainers, across different venues. From there as well, you're able to create your own learning paths. So this is where for every lesson you can assign either, and this comes back to what Victor was saying about the problem-based outcomes, right? So if we think about when we're designing our learning path and designing our lesson plan, what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve? And what are the different steps and activities and reference materials that are going to lead to that outcome? And the way this tool works, you can have one overarching problem-based learning path that cuts across different lessons, or you can see what we've done here, and we've got a different learning path for each lesson. So we've got learning path number 1 for session number 1 and learning path number 2 for session number 2. So this is a very sort of academic approach to the learning plan. So you can see we've got a structure, we've got a plan, we've got some goals that we're trying to get to. So let me show you what that looks like for a user. Great. So as a member of the course, when I'm assigned to a class, like I mentioned before, it will appear automatically in my Microsoft Teams. So you can see in my Teams panel here, for those of you who are familiar with Microsoft Teams, you know that every unique instance of a team is an opportunity for you to collaborate, for you to share, for you to chat. And you can see already, I've been assigned a team here, Manager 101, Manager Training for North America. Because I'm in North America, I've been assigned to the North America team. But my colleagues who are managers in EMEA and APAC, they would be in the EMEA team or the APAC team. Now, from an administrative point of view, in terms of the L&D perspective, I'm managing the one lesson plan and the one series of learning paths here. But from a learner point of view, I've got my own personalized local team to work in. And what you can see here is that we're able to use this to actually post announcements and conversations. So we have a member here saying, if you haven't already, please activate your LinkedIn Learning license, because there's going to be activities later on that will require you to look at tasks on LinkedIn Learning. But this is also where you can do new conversations and say, hello team, we have an activity coming up in the next lesson. Please be ready. And you can @tag for notifications, as well as allowing the team to subscribe to notifications as well. And this is the Microsoft Teams functionality out of the box. If there's a certain lesson or a certain channel that you're interested in being notified in real time, you as an instructor can actually set up these notifications so that as the colleagues and the staff are interacting within the team, within this collaborative space, you can get notified. Okay. And again, these different sessions, you can actually configure them so that they only appear at the time of the lesson. So we haven't set up lesson 4 yet, or session 4 for the next month's session. When we do that, what we'll be able to do as an L&D admin is come into configure lessons, create a new lesson, and then we can set the lesson name, set the topic, define the learning outcomes. And what we'll be able to do is when we publish that, we can choose the date and time for when this lesson is going to appear. So we can organize that in advance. And from the learner point of view, it won't appear in their view until that time is ready. So as a learner, I can go into session number 1, for example, when that lesson got released. And this is where we're able to launch the lesson with a meeting. So we can do things like, we can say schedule a meeting or meet now if we want to do an ad hoc meeting from Teams, knowing that the audience of this team is the class of learners that we want to address. So that makes it really super easy and convenient to both communicate with and schedule meetings and schedule in-person sessions with this class. And again, this is a hybrid tool. Teams is hybrid out of the box. So when we ran this, we did have some people in the office being presented to in real time, and some people dialed in remotely, but everybody's getting the same chat experience, the same video experience, and most importantly, they're able to access the same learning activities. So again, this is all set up automatically. When you publish the course into Teams, it will automatically create the team, add the users, and add the learning activities tab, so that every lesson you can get all of the learning activities and learning objects available here. This is where we're able to view the learning outcomes and see additional information as a learner about what's expected of me in this session. And I'm able to access, I can see how long the task is, what part of a learning path it's in, and whether it's a graded item or not. And I can walk my way through the different objects available, from the Take Point playbook session to refreshers on corporate policy as a PDF. We can have video recaps or other kinds of video and reference material. And we support Office documents, SCORM files, and all sorts of other different learning objects that support the learner's journey. So for each one of these lessons, our instructional design team created an interactive playbook, so to speak, which will step them through the different activities required of them in the L&D. And this is what, again, back to what Victor was saying in terms of having a clear path of learning activities and having a clear measurable outcome to get to. By accessing it in this system, number one, we have a structured playbook that will take people through the different expectations of them in the leadership team, different materials available for them, and interactive exercises that they need to complete. And we can track this by looking in curricula. We're able to access, if I come back to the admin view, we're able to actually come back to the marking and reporting pages to be able to see who has completed the tasks and who hasn't. So we can see here whether people have actually submitted their tasks and whether there's a passing score required and whether the attendees have actually completed the work. So this is one of the things that we're able to do. Of course, it's a demo environment, so it's a little bit light on, but we do have that full reporting available. Also from here, one of the great features that we were mentioning before is the fact of how seamless this is. So as a learner, I am here in the team, chatting with my colleagues, interacting, I can do likes, I can do emojis, I can see what's going on, I can see if a meeting's been scheduled or a Teams meeting. But while I'm in here, I don't have to leave here to go to another system to access my learning material. I can access my learning material right from Teams, in the flow of work, in the flow of collaboration, without having to be disrupted about joining a meeting on a separate platform and taking a learning activity on a separate platform and then trying to chat and collaborate on a separate platform. Everything's all together directly into Teams, and it's so directly integrated that I can even chat right from Teams here as well. So I can hit this chat button up in Teams while I'm accessing my learning content directly from the application and even start a new conversation. Say, hi team, I'm taking the application exercise and I have a question about it. Does anyone have any experiences they can share? And this is the way that we're able to facilitate some of that peer-based learning and interaction in real time. As they work through these exercises, you'll see new sessions get released. And again, we had different guest speakers, so we've got different meeting recordings available, and we're sharing the meeting recordings for people to be able to review, and people can comment and say, I really liked the part at 10 minutes in about, and people can interact and people can share their experiences while accessing the learning activities right from the panel. Okay, and it's not just about consuming material. So for example, one of the sessions in here, one of the activities required to fill out a coaching plan. So you activate the task and you download your coaching plan, and one of the activities following on from that is to then submit your coaching plan for peer review. So when you submit this task, it will come up with a form asking you, please submit the coaching plan for one of your direct reports, and you load it in here. And again, this is something that the managers are able to then, or the L&D team, as well as your peers, are able to review and mark and share your experiences about it. Again, keeping it all together and keeping this part of the actual defined learning outcomes. So it's not just a file sitting in a file share or a file sitting in OneDrive. This is all actually part of the learning experience. And so that was a demonstration of how we used automation and modern collaborative technology with MaivenPoint's curricular solution to start with an outcomes-based structured learning path, and then scale that to multiple regions with Teams and leverage the hybrid nature of Teams to deliver seamless local training that's globally consistent.
All right.
Okay, and that brings us back to the wrap up.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Tim. So in conclusion, then, what are we really saying here? We're saying that L&D can be a really powerful tool to set people up for success and to leverage as a tool to move your business metrics forward. But for that to really work well for your organization and for you to maximize the impact of your L&D initiatives, effective L&D really requires that we kind of tie it back to a business objective and make it always on, just in time, collaborative, and of course scalable, like we said there in the introduction. Again, here at AvePoint, one of the things where we've seen really great success is in developing a global framework that kind of blends the instructor-led mentoring with on-demand, always-on content and gamified goal setting that we've leveraged to increase ROI and drive organizational change here on our side. And we are validating the skill development throughout the process and being very specific about, again, the business result that's getting measured as a result of our L&D engagements. So I think with that, again, if there's a grand conclusion on the slide here, it is to think, I think, very carefully about what you are trying to do with your L&D. Be very intentional with the metric that you are trying to address, and then build something that's much more intentional into the learning engagement that you are building out on behalf of your organization. With that, Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Fantastic. No, thanks, Victor. That's great. So again, thank you everybody for joining today. So myself and Victor, we're from AvePoint, and specifically from the MaivenPoint, our edtech solution vertical of AvePoint Inc. So if you want to find out more, just hit us up on the website, mavenpoint.com, or reach out to us anytime after this event. And thank you very much for your attendance today. We really appreciate your time. We hope you found this demo and this chat insightful. We can also do a personalized demonstration if you require additional information. We also have a number of ebooks and articles available on the website as well. So check us out. Thank you again for your time today, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon. And with that, I think it's time to open it up to some questions.
Thank you, Timothy and Victor. So now we'll be moving forward to the Q&A section. Let me introduce Elisa from MaivenPoint, who will be moderating this session.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Elisa. I head up product marketing for MaivenPoint. Happy to be with all of you today. So I've seen the question boards. Thanks for the questions. Keep it coming. We're here. We actually have Victor staying up late in the US to address all our questions today. Thank you for that. And Tim, who's based out of Australia. So I think let's just dive into the first question. I see this question, a lot of people are responding on. So maybe let's talk about the LinkedIn Learning one. I presume that for LinkedIn Learning, we'll still have to purchase our own individual or corporate LinkedIn Learning license to access the learning content. Victor, would you like to address this? I believe we do that for AvePoint as well.
Yes, correct. So LinkedIn Learning does not come with the solution out of the box. You do still need your own LinkedIn Learning license and subscription. But that kind of brings me actually to an important point. So what tends to happen quite a lot in different organizations is even though maybe you have a centralized LMS or LXP kind of learning solution platform, if you will, it's quite common that many organizations stitch together a learning experience actually pulling from many different resources. You could have your own internal training courses, for instance, recorded webinars. You could be pulling in from LinkedIn Learning. You could have different playbooks and things along those lines that you're hosting through your LMS. And actually the experience ends up becoming quite fragmented over time, the more resources you pull in from multiple different sources. That's why I think actually the playbook that Tim was sharing there as part of the demo is quite interesting, because we actually had very much that challenge on our own hands here at AvePoint. And so what we did was we actually integrated our program content into MaivenPoint, hosting it to the teams that Tim shared with you all just there. But then through the playbook that we've published, we're actually pulling in all the assignments and all of the quizzes. And again, the LinkedIn Learning is a kind of component is integrated into the playbook for each chapter. So the learning experience itself is actually incredibly seamless. And another thing that we didn't talk about in the demo there, but that I think is actually really important to mention here is when you're running these programs, maybe they're running on a cadence or on a schedule, what sometimes ends up happening is you're running a program, but you have these learners that are kind of coming in midway through the program, and it might not be convenient for you to enroll them into something that's already kind of happening, if you will. Well, through the solution that we've shared with you all today, we've actually ended up kind of building an always on type of program, if you will, where actually the playbook, the content, the team is always on. People can always go in there. They can always kind of join in and catch up whenever they want. And it gives us a really great framework for scaling out this manager and leadership training that we're delivering in such a way that it's kind of evergreen, if you will. We don't need to enroll necessarily anybody. We can just add them to a user list, if you will, and they can catch up on their own time. So that's worked very, very well for us.
Great. So, I mean, before we go into the next question, well, I'll get Tim to answer about the content. I see a little question on, is there an option for e-certification to validate the learning process or any other forms of validation? We do currently have e-certs on our other training, other learning platforms at this moment. But we can see a big need for this. We can definitely put this into our product map easily. We do have an upcoming feature on badges. I think this is in response to everyone's demand for micro-credentialing. So that's something that we can look for in our product pipeline. Yeah, maybe Tim, we can take this question about content. So the platform is a learning management system, but does not have content as, is it sourced externally or internally developed?
Yeah, great question. So yes, it is an LMS style platform. Obviously, one of our unique differentiating features is that blended collaborative learning within Microsoft Teams that, you know, gives us a lot of great options for delivering different kind of training. But essentially, yes, it's an LMS. In terms of the content, so we do actually have some content in our system. We have some content specifically around M365 training. So if your users are new to Microsoft 365, they're not familiar with Teams or they're not familiar with the Office suite. I saw there were some questions in the chat from people who aren't fully on Microsoft Teams yet. So we do have some content built in for that to specifically help accelerate that kind of training. We don't have specific L&D, like manager leadership training content built into the platform. That was sourced internally by our own L&D L&D team. And like Victor was saying, we do integrate with LinkedIn Learning, we can integrate with other sources, and on the roadmap, we will be announcing soon some ways to bring in other content such as Go1. So we do have some content in the system already. We do mix and match with content that our own L&D team creates or your own team can create. And we have some future content integrations coming down the pipe very shortly.
Great. So the other question is this, is Workday Learning a competitor? And do you offer any level of integration?
So yes, of course, like we said, it is an LMS and there's no shortage of choice when it comes to LMSs in the market. As mentioned, one of the things that we do uniquely is the way that we integrate with Microsoft Teams. It's unique to us in the sense of those virtual classrooms. It's not a separate app in Teams. It's not something that's launching from Teams. It's really built into the interactive collaborative space. So that's something we do differently. In terms of integrating with other systems, we do have integration options. So there are ways to connect into SharePoint and connect into other systems as well. There are ways to make that happen. It's not a specific Workday connector. It's not like you select it from a list, but it's certainly achievable. So there are ways to do that, especially if you have Power Apps and Power Automate functionality. So a little bit technical, but short answer is it's possible.
Yeah, I believe it's also SCORM certified. So any kind of learning objects can just come in. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Or just another one. The learning seems to be self-driven. Is there any way we can track the progress of each member? I believe so. Victor, we do that in TakePoint, do we? We can track the progress of each learning member.
We do, yeah. But we can obviously, through the integration that we have with LinkedIn, we can track completion from the LinkedIn dashboard too. So.
Great. So completion in terms of where they progress in the learning, like homeworks they're assigned, quizzes, etc. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So I can't remember if we flashed it up during the demo or not, because I clicked on a lot of things. So now I don't remember everything that I clicked on. But yes, you can actually, at a course level or at an individual level, look at the people who are in the course and how far they've come along with the tasks that have been assigned to them, whether they've completed them or not completed them. And if it's an assessment task, you can actually see how they're faring. And that will give you a status of completion in terms of are the people engaged? Are they actually working through the tasks and assignments that we're assessing them? And you're right, some of it is self-led, but some of it's also instructor-led too. Like what we mentioned but didn't show is that each one of those sessions that occurs has a live meeting that goes along with it, where our staff and our guest speakers are providing instruction and direction on what to do with those reference objects and those tasks as well. So we're not just expecting people to click it on their own, it's actually part of that interactive experience.
Mm-hmm. So just for Joanne, yes, the slides will be shared with you. I think Qingxuan will do it after the webinar today. So maybe we have more time for some questions, maybe another 5 minutes. Meanwhile, do you want to share a little bit about, is this only for learning, or can we do other things in an organization? Or is this just for leadership training?
Well, some of the other, actually, Victor, do you want to answer that one? Some of the other ways that we're using it?
Yeah, I can speak to that question. So we've actually seen really great success leveraging MaivenPoint on the onboarding side as well. And I'm looking at the participant list here. I assume many of you are working within an organization that has a global footprint. One of the challenges that we have as a global organization is that we're obviously hiring across multiple different regions all the time. We have new joiners start literally every week, and we have people teams and HR teams hosting these new hire orientations and so on around the world in various different countries, literally on an everyday basis. To be fair, we didn't have the best mechanic, I think, for scaling all of that work in a sensible way, because what would happen was literally every time before we started leveraging MaivenPoint and had kind of more of a structured and scalable onboarding path, what would happen is you would have new hires join on, say, a Monday, and then the people team would do a orientation session with them, and then maybe you had another person or a handful of people join on the Wednesday, and so they would do the same session again. And this happened kind of globally across all of our regions, actually very, very consistently, very regularly. This becomes a bit of an issue in the long term, because while it's a great experience that you have a people team and, maybe an ops team or an IT team or, a legal team or a marketing team who are available and are happy to support that ongoing kind of onboarding demand, if you will, when you start looking at how much time that takes organizationally and how many man hours you end up spending on things that are actually kind of repetitive and actually could be reimagined through an always-on kind of model like we spoke about today, the hours that get spent on that type of work are actually humongous when you start totaling them up in the aggregate. So one of the, just without going too much into what we're doing here at AvePoint, one of the things that we've saved, I mean, one of the kind of time metrics that we've been working towards is quite simply saving time. And in the US, for instance, alone where I'm based, we're currently saving just our people team, which is one team among many others. We're saving them 3 hours of work every week in just one office, because we now have this scalable always-on program. It's hosted through MaivenPoint. Again, people can join whenever they want. They can complete it, at home while they're ordering a coffee or, on the road, wherever they are. And I think it's a really great way of, again, making the things that are scalable and kind of automatable, if that's a word, automating what you can automate without losing the learner along the way. And then, of course, still spending time with them and, welcoming them to the organization. But really, I think this is an opportunity actually for all of us to think about how can we make some of the things that we are maybe operationalizing in a repetitive way, how can we maybe automate those and save ourselves the time so that we can actually spend more time doing high value work with all of our new joiners and really getting them ingrained into the organization early on. So I think that's very worthwhile thinking about.
Yeah, and just to add on to that as well, Victor, so you mentioned, the learners can sort of attack those tasks in their own time and they can do it at their own pace. It's important to point out that this is all still happening in a dedicated team for that onboarding cohort too. So they actually have the opportunity, even though they're doing it at their own time, at their own pace, they do have real-time interaction where they can ask questions and they can introduce themselves, meet their fellow new hires. And if the people team does want to jump in and run a live session, in addition to the on-demand stuff, they can do that at any time, because that cohort's together in that team and they can just hit the button and start a meeting with them. So you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Maybe one more thing that I'll mention quickly here on this, since we're on the topic. For global organizations such as ours, I think another thing that's really important is that there's an element of providing a good and consistent onboarding experience to any new hire, regardless of which market they join. And so I think the MaivenPoint solution and the kind of scalable structure that I spoke about just then, that kind of solves for that problem quite nicely and quite neatly, because we do, for instance, now gamify elements of our onboarding, and we have a kind of globally standardized game in place where people join AvePoint, they learn about AvePoint, who we are, our mission, our culture, our values, and so on. But then through MaivenPoint and these localized teams that Tim was sharing there in the demo, we actually have the ability to, in addition to that globally consistent onboarding messaging that we share, we have the ability to also provide the locally relevant and the locally required documentation, policies, and operation manuals and things like that. So that, again, we're kind of protecting the experience globally, making sure that everyone has a good start with the business, but they also work through all of the locally required compliance requirements in a way that works for them.
Yeah. Well, on the same note, I think just an extension to the question, one more person has asked, this platform allows interaction or collaboration within each region. For example, you created Asia, North America, EMEA teams in your MS Teams interface for them to exchange regionally. How will you then promote interaction for cross-region learning using the platform? I believe we do have a lot of cross-regional learning activities in AvePoint. So how would you see this as an extension of the system to support that?
No, so it does it already. So the regional classes that we're showing are set by the L&D according to your directives. So in this case, we worked with Victor and the rest of the L&D team to say, this is the overarching course we want to do, and these are the 3 audiences we want to deliver it to. If you just had one audience that was a global audience, that's easy as well. That's just one class with the required people in it. So that's something that's already built into the system. So it's very flexible. You can do that.
Great. So I think one of the favorite questions in actually this month for any webinar is, can we use ChatGPT into LMS? So, well, definitely, because I think our Chief Product Officer has raised this before. We definitely can upload documents. We actually currently have a bot inside the system called Delphi that will take in all your questions and guide you through how to use it. But I think with the ChatGPT integrations with Bing and the Microsoft system, we definitely can look out for more features and how we can feed questions and perhaps have the AI assisted chatbot to comb through your knowledge base, be it internal or external, to introduce some answers that are related to the context of what you're asking. So we hope to share more about this in the coming features, in the upcoming product releases. But that's an interesting question.
I'm not even here right now. This is just all ChatGPT and AI.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the informative session. I hope everybody had a great one. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.